So the last of the primary colours are up to date, and we're going to be taking a look at the green cards that have made it into the Pauper Cube. Hello and welcome to Life Begins at 20. My name is Mark and thank you so much for joining me. Now, if you've been following along this budget cube build along series, it's now time to actually get into seeing which cards I've put into the cube. What I will mention to start off with is that I've upped the cube size to 450 cards rather than the 405, but that's just going to be going through testing, and then hopefully during that point in time I can see which cards are performing, which ones are not, and then slowly whittle it down to 405. But at this moment in time, with Masters 25 coming out as well, during the point in time where I was building this, I actually wanted to put in 10 cards from there and a few other bits and pieces as well, just to kind of see how the cube was going, and then we can look at bringing that size down. But for now it's 450 cards, and there'll be a link in the description below as well for the Cube Tutor link to see that cube as a whole list. If you want to just copy it, feel free to. If you want to make your own changes and suggestions, again, let me know in the comment section below. If you see some cards in there you think, oh, why have you got that in there? I can think of a better one. Great, let me know in the comment section as well below, because to be perfectly honest, I don't know every card in Magic. I'm not going to say I do, because that would be mental. But if there are cards that I've missed that would make a huge improvement over what I've got, again, let me know in the comment section below. You'll know what all of the art types are as well from previous videos that I've put together. I will link the playlist on the screen now for you. There'll be a card on the screen so you can take a look and see what's going on there, so you can know what all the different art types I'm going to be supporting are in this cube. But for now, let's get stuck in and see which cards I've put in. Starting off now with the 1-drops in green with the creatures, we're going to be looking at a couple of things throughout this colour. The primary archetype and role for green is ramp, so that's why you can definitely see starting off with Arbor Elf and Llanowar Elves. So we've got ourselves a nice little bit of ramp here. These are the only two I've got in the 1-drops. That might end up having to put some more in, but for now I think this might be enough because of the number of 2 and 3-drops that we've got, plus other spells as well. And the other aspect of green that we've got is a mid-range deck, but we've also got some slightly aggressive 1-drops here as well. We've got ourselves a Basking Rootweiler, 1/1 for 1, but you can have a madness cost here, which is fantastic. If you manage to discard the card, you can cast it for free, which is great. Plus means you can then play 1 and a green to give it +2/+2 to the end of the turn. You can only activate that once, but swinging in with a 3/3 that was potentially free would be fantastic. Next we've got Frilled Sandweiler, so again, similar like little lizard guy. That looks pretty cool. 1/1 for 1 again. You can then do the same thing, it just doesn't have the madness cost. That's the only difference they've got between the two cards. This one's come from Hour of Devastation as well. Next up, we've got a 2/2 for 1 in Pouncing Jaguar, and I really do like the artwork style of this. It almost looks like the Jaguar that was in Tarzan movie. Maybe we can get an alteration on that to make it a little bit more cartoony for that kind of Disney theme going on there. But the only difference here to make it, the downside being a 2/2 for 1 is that you've got an echo cost every single turn. But with green trying to ramp out really quickly, I don't necessarily see paying 1 regularly for this being that much of an issue. Next up, we've got Rogue Elephant. So this is a 3/3 for 1 this time, but the only thing you're going to have to do when you have to bury and sacrifice a forest when you play it. So really it's costing you a 2 mana for 3/3 because it's putting you slightly behind, but to be perfectly honest, in green that may not be an issue, especially later on in the game you get yourself that not a problem. Next we've got Sedge Scorpion. It's a 1/1 death touch for 1, great little blocker, can use Viridian Longbow to have some little bits of shenanigans there as well. Next up we've got Skargan Pit Skulk, so it's a 1/1 for 1, but with Bloodthirst 1, really you're going to be hitting in and making sure that this is a 2/2 more often than not, and creatures with power less than it can't block it, so it means it's always either going to be trading for the same, or something big is going to have to block it, and if you're playing against tokens it can be swinging in, not a problem. Next up we've got Quirion Ranger, so for 1 it's a 1/1 and you can return a forest you control to its owner's hands and untap target creature, and you can use that ability more than once each turn. So if you wanted to generate some serious ramp you could use that. If you wanted to be able to untap a big creature you swung in with as well to make sure it's like kind of pseudo vigilance kind of going on there, you can do that, not a problem. And the last of the 1-drops, you may look at it going, what the hell, that's a 6-drop. No, I'm classing this as a 1-drop just because of the spend cost. I mean, green can happily ramp out to get this, not an issue. But for me, I'm putting this in as a 1-drop with a suspend cost there, just because it means that you can get yourself a 5/5 after 5 turns of just paying the 1 mana, which would be fantastic. But if you have to pay 6 mana for it, it's not necessarily the end of the world. So moving on now into the 2-drops, we're starting off with Borderland Explorer as one of our many ramped cards we've got here. So it enters the battlefield, each player may discard a card, and then whoever's discarded a card may search his or her library for a basic land, put it into their hand, and shuffle the library. I mean, not everybody's necessarily going to want to be discarding, so as long as you've got something you want to get rid of, great, you're going to be able to get yourself, you know, another basic land. And it also means it's a 3/1 attacking creature there for 2 as well, which is pretty decent. Next up, Sakura Tribe Elder. Again, it's really nice to have as another ramp card. So you've got a 1/1 card there for 2. You can sacrifice it and search your library for a basic land, put that into the battlefield, tap and shuffle your library. So it's great to be able to potentially, your opponent's swinging in, you can use this as a blocker and then sacrifice it before damage is dealt, so it negates their damage. Then we've got Viridian Emissary, so it's a 2/1 for 2, and when it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield, tap and shuffle your library. So it's a great blocker, you can just be swinging in with it, and whenever it dies, because it's going to die, you're going to get a little bit of an added benefit from that. Next, we've got Wall of Roots, and it's a nice foil version we managed to get from Iconic Masters. 1 and a green, it's a 0/5 defender, so you can put a -0/-1 counter on it, and you can add 1 green to your mana pool, and you can only do this once a turn, but that's more than fine. You can be able to do that 5 times before it ends up disappearing. Moving on now into the rest of the cards, and we've got Aenoch Survivalist, and this is one I'm going to be trying out. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of morphs, like I mentioned in the downgrades from Masters 25, but to be perfectly honest, with the amount of artifacts and enchantments that it's actually happening within this cube, it may well be worth taking a look at and giving it a try. So you cast it for 3, face down as a 2/2, you then megamorph it for 1 and a green. It comes up as a 2/1 and destroys target artifact or enchantment and opponent creature control. So that is really, really strong, especially with signets in the cube and other artifacts as well. And with there being a green-white enchantments hexproof kind of theme going on, and there's other enchantments as well, it may well definitely do some work. So it's definitely going to be giving that one a test. Next up, we've got Ambush Viper, Flash Death Touch for a 2 with a 2/1. It just means you can be able to have this as a piece of removal with someone's attacking in, or, okay, end of turn, I'm going to put it down, swing in with it, or you can then use it as a Viridian Longbow shenanigans as well. But, you know, it's just a nice little way of getting a piece of removal, which your opponent may not be expecting in green. Next up, we've got Dark Thicket Wolf. So for 1 and a green, it's a 2/2, and then you can pay 2 and a green. It gets +2/+2 to the end of turn. You can only activate that once, but when later on in the game, green's going to have plenty of mana, so you have it swinging in with a 4/4 there, and it just, all of the damage will end up adding up. Next, we've got Deadly Recluse. So again, we've got a 1/2 with Reach and Death Touch. It's going to be able to get rid of any flyer your opponent has, and especially with white and blue having a kind of flyers kind of archetype going on there. Blue's got plenty of flyers there. White's got a few as well. It just means it's going to be able to block those as well and get rid of some of the bigger threats. Next up, Mayaboa, 1 and a green, it's a 2/1 with Swamp Walk, so that just means if your opponent has a swamp, it can't be blocked, and you've got 1 for 1 green, you can regenerate it as well, so you can just keep coming back for more and more damage as needed, and you just keep bringing this creature back as a blocker, if needed. Same next we've got now with Riverboa, so Island Walk, if defending player controls an island, it's unblockable, and it's got regenerate as well, so it's basically the same card there, it's just a different type of unblockable. Next up, we've got Silhana Ledgewalker. So for 1 and a green, again, we're going with the hexproof theme because, again, like I said, Selesnya's got a little bit of a hexproof enchantments theme going on, especially within green, and then the mid-range as well within green, it was also doing that. So it can't be blocked except by creatures with flying, so it's not completely unblockable. There's still ways of, getting through and killing this, but a 1/1 with hexproof that can only be blocked by flyers is going to be able to do some serious work for you over the course of the game, especially if you can put some enchantments on it and really pump this thing up. Next, we've got Thornwheeled Archer. So for 1 and a green, it's a 2/1 with Reach and Death Touch. So similar to the Spider, except the stats are the other way around. And then last of all, we've got Wild Mongrel. And this guy is great. So for 1 and a green, it's a 2/2. You can discard a card and it gets +1/+1 and becomes the colour of your choice until the end of turn. So if your opponent's trying to remove it and it's saying, well, it can, they're going to use Doomblade, for example, you can discard a card, make it black, and it can't be killed. Other such things like that. So it's just, it's got a way of protecting itself. You've got a way of filling up your graveyard to be able to get stuff back as well if needs be. Or you've got a way of actually getting some of the Madness cards into play as well. So like the Rootweiler in the 1-drop, so you can get that out for free using this card. Moving on now into the 3-drops, we've got Yavimaya Elder. So this is probably one of my favourite 3-drops in terms of actual ramp, because I think it's great. 1 and 2 green, it's a 2/1. When it's put into the graveyard from play, you may search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put one into your hand, and then shuffle your library. But you can also then pay 2 mana to sacrifice it, draw a card as well, plus get the 2 lands. So overall, you're going to be paying 5 mana to be able to get that card draw as well. But to be perfectly honest, you can do that. You can, again, like you said earlier, you can use it as a blocker. Then before damage is resolved, sacrifice to get your card draw and then get your lands on top as well. So that's going to be great for us. Next up, we've got Croconora. So for 2 and a green, it's a 1/3 with reach and evolve. So again, like with green, there's plenty of big creatures that are going to be able to help get that evolve trigger to actually happen, and then this will keep pumping up and pumping up and pumping up over the course of the game and becoming quite a big creature itself, but it just means that it's be able to block a hell of a lot of the flyers that your opponent may have. Next up, we've got Hungry Spriggan, and again, we've got a nice little foil there from Modern Masters 2017. It's a 1/1 with trample for 2 and a green, but don't let that fool you, because whenever it attacks, it gets +3/+3 to the end of turn, so it's really a 4/4 trampler when it's attacking. The downside for this, again, would be when it's not attacking, it's just a 1/1, so it's not going to be the best blocker in the world, but I think at this cost, it's not too bad a price. Next up, we've got Jolrael's Centaur. So for 1 and 2 green, it's a 2/2 with flanking. So whenever a creature without flanking is trying to block it, that creature gets -1/-1 to the end of turn. And it also is hexproof as well. So there's plenty of little hexproof creatures going on that be able to benefit from all of the cards that we've got going on in green. Next up, we've got Phantom Tiger. 2 and a green, it's a 1/0, but it comes into play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so really it's a 3/2, and if any damage will be dealt to it, you just prevent that damage by taking a +1/+1 counter off of it. So kind of almost feel like it's persist. That'll be the way I would see this, so it just means that it's going to stay around for longer. And last up, we've got Simian Grunts. It's a 2 and a green for a 3/4, and it's got an echo cost of you have to keep paying it every single turn. But the positive thing here is it's basically got flash, so you can bring this in as a surprise blocker, kill off one of the opponent's creatures, and then if you want to keep the echo cost going on the next turn to swing in with it, you can. So moving on now into the 4-drops, and this is where we get to quite the beefy bulk section of our green, because of trying to become like a mid-range rampy style decks that we're trying to support here. Starting off, Blastoderm, again, it's got Shroud, so being hexproof, it's going to be very, very useful. Plus, it's also got fading as well. So for 2 and 2 green, it's 5/5, fading 3. It just means that, I mean, to be perfectly honest, if it was a 4 mana for a 5/5 hexproof, without the fading, that'd be way too strong. So fading just means it's going to disappear in 3 turns. Not too much of an issue. Next up, Festerhide Boar, 3 and a green. It's a 3/3 with trample, but it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it if a creature died this turn, and depending on the deck style that you're playing, that shouldn't be too difficult to achieve there. So 5/5 trampler for 4 is very, very nice. Next up, we've got Imperiosaur. So again, you've got yourself a 5/5 creature for 2 and 2 green, but you can only use basic lands to cast it, and thankfully being Pauper, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Next up, we've got Jade Guardian. So this one's come from Ixalan block, and for 3 and a green, it's a 2/2 hexproof, and when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target Merfolk you control. To be honest there, I don't think there actually are any other Merfolk within, very many Merfolk anyway within the cube. I think there might be a couple in blue, but other than that, there's not a huge amount. So realistically, we're treating this as a 3/3 hexproof creature for 4. Next up, we've got Mold Shambler. So for 3 and a green, it's a 3/3, and if it was kicked with the kicker of 1 and a green, enters the battlefield, destroy target non-creature permanent. That is nice. If you've got the extra mana, that's going to do some serious work, and to be perfectly honest, this will probably be seen more as a 6-drop than a 4-drop, but if you can't afford the kicker, it's not the worst creature in the world, but to be perfectly honest, most of the time you're going to be hitting that with the kicker there. Next, we've got Pima Outrider. So it's a 3/3 trample creature for 4 there, but it's also got Fabricate 1. So when it enters the battlefield, you can either put a +1/+1 counter on it, making it a 4/4 trample for 4, which is pretty decent stats, or you can create a 1/1 servo artifact creature token on the side, so you're getting yourself 2 bodies instead. And I do like the versatility of Fabricate creatures. Next up, we've got Penumbra Spider, and again, I really like the foils of these. So for 2 and 2 green, it's a 2/4 with reach. When it dies, you get to create a version of it that's just a black one, and you know, that's great. It just means you're going to get more use and value out of the card, and it's great for, you know, blocking all of those flying creatures. Next up, we've got Primal Hunt Beast. 3 and a green, a 3/3 hexproof creature. Is pretty much the same as Jade Guardian, except the Grey Jade Guardian can potentially move that +1/+1 counter elsewhere if needs be, but does a pretty much similar job there. Next up, we've got Wicked Bow Elder. So for 3 and a green, it's a 4/4, but it comes into play with a -1/-1 counter on it. You can then pay 1 green to remove that counter and destroy target artifact or enchantment. So again, getting rid of enchantments and artifacts is going to be very, very strong. Having that ability to do it, it can only do that once unless you blink it back into play and get that -1/-1 counter on it. But being able to do that, pay that 1 green, destroy something that your opponent is really, really, you know, needing, either a piece of equipment, or it's going to be an aura, or it's going to be a big enchantment, for example, that take on one of your creatures. Killing off an Oblivion Ring for 1 green mana, I'll take that every day. And then last of all, we've got Wild Leotal, so that's, you know, the king of the jungle basically. So 2 and 2 green, it's a 5/4, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice it unless you pay 1. So it's basically got itself a little upkeep cost of 1 green. It's not the end of the world, especially in these colours. And for a 5/4 for 4, that's pretty decent stats. So moving on now into the 5+ drops, we're starting off with what replaced Sentinel Spider in the form of Bitterbow Sharpshooters. So it's a 4/4 with Vigilance and Reach, which is basically the same as Sentinel Spider was. The only difference being here is that the mana cost there is 4 and a green, whereas Sentinel Spider was 3 and 2 green. So it means it's able to splash a little bit better if someone wants to just try and get this into their decks. And with Vigilance and Reach, you can be swinging in with that 4/4 body, which is pretty decent and strong. And you can also then block pretty much every single flyer within the cube. Next up, we've got Entourage of Trest. So for 4 and a green, it's a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. So you're going to get that extra card draw value out of that. And while you're the Monarch, it can block an additional creature each turn, which is great. And it just means that because you're becoming the Monarch, you're getting a lot of extra card draw. Your opponent's going to need to try and swing in there to deal some damage to get that Monarchy back so they can get the advantage from that. And by having this being able to block multiple creatures, it means that it's going to trade better, which is going to be fantastic for us. Next up, we've got Nessian Asp, and this is probably a ridiculously strong creature. I really do like this card. So 4 and a green, it's a 4/5 with Reach, so again, perfect for killing off, you know, blocking your opponent's flying creatures. And for 6 and a green, when you've got that much mana, which shouldn't be too difficult, again, ramping into, it gets Monstrosity 4, so then it becomes an 8/9 Reach creature, which is just amazing. The ways of getting that, putting Rancor on that, swinging with Trample is going to do some serious work for us. Next up, we've got Tajuru Pathwarden. So for 4 and a green, it's a 5/4 with Vigilance and Trample. Again, decent enough stats to warrant putting in here. Next up, we've got Hooting Mandrills. So for 5 and a green, it's a Delve creature. It's a 4/4 with Trample. So because it's Delve, each card you exile from the graveyard while casting this pays for 1 of it. That's going to make this a hell of a lot cheaper than 5 and a green, especially later on in the game when you end up getting it. So don't ever really expect to be paying 6 mana for that. Next up, we've got Havenwood Worm. So for 6 and a green, it's a 5/6 with Trample, but it's also got Flash, which is great because it means you can have, again, another surprise blocker for your opponent. And then it'll be doing some serious work on the next turn, or you play at the end of your opponent's turn to be able to swing in for it as well. So that really strong. Next up, we've got Crows and Tusker. So for 5 and 2 green, it's a 6/5, and when it's also got cycling as well. So this can be seen as, you know, another one of those mana ramp spells if needs be. And with ways of getting stuff back from the graveyard, it's not the end of the world to try and get putting it in there. So whenever you cycle it, you may search your library for a basic land, reveal that card, and put it into your hand and shuffle your library as well. So it's not going to be a dead card early on in the game if you get it into your hand. And last of all, we've got Maul Splicer. I'm very glad to have picked up this nice little foil promo version. So for 6 and a green, it's a 1/1, but it enters the battlefield with 2 3/3 colourless column artifact creature tokens, and each of those then have Trample. So 3 bodies for 1 card, 2 of those with Trample. That's going to be really beneficial for you. And if you can then play this as well with a blink effect or something along those lines and get extra value out of it, that would be great. So moving on now into the instants for green, starting off with Praise Vengeance. So for 1 mana, target creature gets +2/+2 to the end of turn at instant speed, plus it's then got Rebound. So if you cast this from your hand, exile it as a resolve. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast this card without paying its mana cost. So for 1 mana, you're giving one of your creatures +2/+2 on the attack for 2 turns, and that is really nice value. Next up, we've got Vines of Vastwood. So for 1 and a kicker of green, which you can pay. Target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control, so a nice way of protecting it. Plus, if it's kicked, it gets +4/+4 to the end of turn as well. So you can be swinging and your opponent's going to go, okay, I've got the piece of removal I might need. Nope, hexproof, great, can't be a target of it. And it's going to be swinging in there for some extra damage as well. Really nice little combat trick there. Next up, we've got Pounce. So for 1 and a green, target creature you control fight and target creature you don't control. So what would green be without having some of these fight cards as well? It just means you're going to get the extra advantage over your opponent with your bigger creatures. Next up, we've got Predator's Strike. So for 1 and a green, target creature gets +3/+3 till the end of turn and gains Trample. So that's going to be able to get one of your bigger creatures, like the Nessian Asp, for example, just to be swinging in for that extra bit of damage and the trample on top, just to get over, past the line and in for the win there. Next up, we've got Sprout Swarm. So for 1 and a green with Convoke, so each creature you tap while paying this spell reduces the total cost by 1. So you can buy this back for 3 as well. And put a 1/1 sapling creature token into play. So tapping some of your token creatures, for example, to be able to help pay for that, including its buyback cost, will just mean that you can keep getting tokens over and over and over and over again. Next up, we've got Sylvan Might. So for 1 and a green, at instant speed, target creature gets +2/+2 and trample to the end of turn. And I like this one being in the queue because of flashback as well. So it goes into the graveyard. Your opponent may end up forgetting about it there. You can then pay 2 and 2 green and get the same thing and potentially get through for the win. Next up, we've got Amber Scale, so another one of our pieces of removal going on here for green. So for 2 and a green, target creature you control gets +1/+0 to the end of turn, and it deals damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent's control. So that is really nice. It's just a way of, again, utilising your bigger creatures to kill off some of your opponents. And last of all, we've got Pulse of Marasa. So for 2 and a green, you get to return target creature or land card from your graveyard to your owner's hand, and you get 6 life. So like I was saying, there are ways to get stuff back from the graveyard, and it does, you get the benefit of putting them in there, and then if you can get them back, replay the ability as well, and it'd be absolutely great. So moving on now into the sorceries, and to be perfectly honest, there's only the 3. We've all got mana ramp here going on. So Cultivate and Kadama's Reach, basically the same card. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So again, having both of those is fantastic. Plus, we've got Search for Tomorrow here as well, so you can pay 2 and a green for it. Just put that into frame now, and find a basic land, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Or you can use a spend cost for 1 green, and that's probably more likely of where it's going to be. But again, 3 pieces of mana ramp there for green. So moving on now into the enchantments for green, and we've got a couple of things going on here. We've just got normal enchantments going on, plus we've also got the auras, which end up working in this Silesia hexproof enchantments kind of style deck that I was trying to achieve here. But these enchantments work so well even outside of that deck type. So to start off with, we've got Rancor, which is just a really strong enchantment in green. For 1 green mana, you get to enchant a creature that gets +2/+0 and trample, and whenever it's put into a graveyard, you get to put it back into your hand, and that's so strong. It just means you can keep playing that value out over and over and over again. Next up, we've got Utopia Sprawl. So for 1 green mana, you get to enchant a forest, and when it comes into play, you get to choose a colour of any one colour you want. Whenever the enchanted forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of the chosen colour to his or her mana pool. So say, for example, you wanted to, even if you only wanted to use it as a forest, that forest will now tap for 2 mana. Or if you wanted to have it for a different colour, again, it will just keep doing that. So that is really nice. Next up, we've got Night Soil. So for 2 green, it's an enchantment where you can pay 1, exile 2 creature cards from a single graveyard, which could be your opponent's. Put a put a 1/1 green sapling creature token onto the battlefield. So if your opponent's trying to fill up their graveyard, or a load of your cheaper creatures end up getting killed, you can get additional benefit out of them by paying that 1 mana to put a sapling creature token out onto the battlefield there. Next up, we've got another one of our buffing up enchantments here. So we've got Cartouche of Strength. So for 2 and a green, enters the battlefield, you may have enchanted creature fight a creature an opponent controls, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and trample. So it's a removal spell on top of a buff, which is more than good enough for me. You can get rid of one of your opponent's creatures, and then you can then end up swinging in for a lot more damage on your turn. Next, we've got Elephant Guide. I really do like this card. So for 2 and a green, you get to enchant a creature to get +3/+3, which is great. But when the enchanted creature dies, you get to get a 3/3 elephant creature token onto the battlefield as well. So you're getting so much extra value out of this. You're pumping up one of your guys to be even bigger to swing in for a load of damage. And worst case scenario, it dies while you're getting yourself a 3/3 at the end of that as well. And the last one we've got in the enchantments here is Moldavine Cloak. So for 2 and a green, target creature gets +3/+3, but you could also dredge 2. So if you would draw a card instead, you may pay exactly 2 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard and then return this to your hand. So you can, again, it's similar to Rancor in some respects, where you can keep getting it, you can just keep getting it back over and over again if needs be. So there we have all of the green cards that I've put into my cube, and needless to say, I think I've supported ramp well enough. There may well be some other 2-drops or 3-drops may end up needing to be moved around to get a couple more of those 1-drop mana elves in, but overall I think ramp is well achieved, and there's definitely some big creatures in there. Potentially there's a couple of them from newer sets that I've had a bit of a look at, like the worm from Amonkhet, and there was also Rampaging Hippo as well that I've kind of had a look at. It's kind of sitting on the side, and we're going to see how testing end up going for that. Hexproof wise for Selesnya, it seems pretty decent as well. There's plenty of those cards. I'll have to make sure that I've made there isn't too many of them, but I think overall green has done well enough. But if you think there are any cards that maybe don't fit into the cube so well, or maybe there'll be something that will do and make a better position for the cube, do let me know in the comment section below, because I'd be very interested to find out which cards you think are working, which ones you don't think are going to be working. But definitely I think testing this thoroughly is going to make a very, very interesting topic. And for those of you that have asked in the previous comment sections as well about gameplay, it will be coming. There will be gameplay of this entirety of the cube when I've finished off the videos. I'm going to be starting off with a collaboration I've done with Matt from Total MTG, which was, I'll put a card on the screen now for you, which was case of Paper Magic with a challenge deck. We're going to be doing that again coming up for the other challenge decks as well, and seeing how they end up playing, and then you can kind of gauge to see what kind of gameplay style I'm going to be trying to go for. And then once that's been done, I'm going to be going through, say, Cube for 2 series, seeing actually all of those drafting formats in action, playing some games with the cube as well, and then hopefully it will develop further into, say, 8-man drafts as well, because that'd be actually pretty cool to do. I would just like to take this moment to thank my Patreons of the channel. I can't thank you enough for the help and support that you're giving me. If you'd like to do the same, head over to patreon.com/lifebegins@20, and there'll be a link in the description below for that as well, where there are plenty of rewards to choose from. With your support, we can really push to make this channel even better. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for new videos every Tuesday and Friday. With your support, we can really help this channel to grow. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.